let's look at the very first element we're going to discuss, and that is a text label, or a UI label as Apple refers to it. Open up your main storyboard. Inside the toolbox, scroll down until you come to Label. And when you click it, down in the Properties box at the bottom right, we have the description, which is UI label, and it tells us a few more details. Click and drag that over to our view controller and drop it in. Right, once we've dropped it in and we have it selected, in the Properties section at the bottom right, we can give it a name. So let's call this button label, because we're going to use it to identify a button. If we like, we can subclass this by putting our own class in, but we're not going to do that, and you'd rarely have occasion to do that actually. We also have a bunch of other settings like text. We can have plain, attributed text. We can have the actual text. So let's call this button. Let's just call this button is here. I really can't type today. Button is here. You can set a color for it, a font, alignment, etc. Lines allows you to set a set number of lines for it. Usually, with a label, you would keep this at 1. Later on, using other text items, we would have more lines. You can set it enabled or disabled, and that changes it to a light grey color that tells the user that the label is not currently in use. And my Xamarin is not responding. You may find occasionally that your Xamarin crashes, and I'm afraid it's just part of the package when it comes to Xamarin. It's not great at bug handling. It crashes way more often than Xcode, I've found. And it's back. We can set other things, and some of the things I like to have with my labels is to change the background. If I want a color scheme in my app, I can change the tint of the label. I can have a dark text color. And there are many other options. Okay, so that is a basic label. Now what I'm going to do is dive a bit deeper into this Xamarin Designer. If I just zoom in and I go ahead and click the button, what I would like to do is actually change the width of this button. Not only that, but I would also like to position it on my screen at a certain place. What we can do is use constraints. Up at the top of our Xamarin Designer, we have this little plus button which adds the recommended constraints. And when you click that, you'll notice it's given us 4 constraints. We've got 2 long blue lines, 1 for height and 1 for width. And what this is going to do is position the button on our device screen in a relative manner that takes its cues from the size of the screen it's on. So in other words, I can set my button to be, if I click this blue line at the side here and I click widget under properties, I can change this constant to 10, and that's going to move the button to 10 decimal points or pixels from the left hand side of whatever screen it's running on. And constraints are a powerful way to make sure your items are always visible no matter the size of screen. So I'm going to click this one below it, which stands for a width, and I'm going to slowly increment this and see how big we have to make it to make everything fit. Button is here. There we go. And then I'm going to click this top one, and I'm going to make this quite close to the top, so 50 pixels from the top. We can leave the height as it is. So that's your introduction to the label inside of iOS, and don't forget that labels are used generally as their namesake to label things. And also, you've learnt how to auto-constrain things. In the subsequent lessons, we'll look at other text fields and text views that are available, and we'll learn a little bit more about constraints.